Good morning, friends. So today we're going to be working on lesson 15-3, Properties of Quadrilaterals. So yesterday or Friday we learned how to classify triangles. Today we're going to learn how to classify quadrilaterals. So the difference between a triangle, tri, the prefix meaning 3, quadrilateral, quad meaning 4. So how can you recognize a quadrilateral? A quadrilateral is any polygon with 4 sides. Quadrilaterals can be classified by their angles or pairs of sides. So if you think about this, you can cut each of these quadrilaterals into 2 triangles. When you do that, we figured out on Friday that each triangle's angles measure 180 degrees. They have to. So a quadrilateral, if you split it in half here, each of those triangles equal 180 degrees. So you have 2 triangles. So 180 degrees plus 180 degrees, all of the measures have to equal 360 degrees. So that's important to remember when we're talking about angle measurements in quadrilaterals. So a parallelogram is both pairs of opposite sides are parallel and equal in length. So parallel side here, these 2 are parallel, and then these 2 are also parallel. Trapezoid is a little bit different than a lot of these quadrilaterals in that it only has 1 pair of parallel sides. So this side right here, if you kept going, they would actually intersect at some point. So the parallel sides are this one and this one. So what does the term parallel mean? It means that 2 lines that never cross and are the same distance apart. So we kind of talked about skiing, that you want to keep your skis parallel. You don't ever want to cross them because when you do, that's when you fall. What do a parallelogram and a trapezoid have in common? They both have at least 1 pair of parallel sides. A rectangle is also a parallelogram, and it's a parallelogram with 4 right angles. So they don't have it drawn in here, but you can picture that it has the little boxes in each of these corners, and each of those equal 90 degrees. So again, if I go back and I say if I split this right in half, you have your angle measurement. So this would be 90 degrees, this would be 90 degrees, this would be 90 degrees, this would be 90 degrees. So what do rectangles and parallelograms have in common? Opposite sides are parallel. So this side is parallel and then these 2 sides are parallel. A rhombus looks kind of like a square but shifted. So a rhombus is a parallelogram with all sides the same length, just like a square has all sides that equal the same length. But how do a rhombus and a square compare? They are both parallelograms with 4 equal sides, but a square has 4 90-degree angles. So this rhombus does not have 90-degree angles. You can tell because it's shifted. They're not like the perfect square like a rectangle would be or a square. So a square, again, is a rectangle with all sides the same length. So in next couple lessons, we're going to be talking about the characteristics of parallelograms. So a square is actually a rectangle because if you look at the rectangle's definition, it says a parallelogram with 4 right angles. A square also has a parallelogram. However, you can't say a rectangle is a square because not all the sides are equal. A rectangle, this side measurement is equal and this side measurement is equal, but you can call a square a rectangle. So a square can also be called a rhombus. So a square can also be a rhombus, but a rhombus cannot be a square because the characteristic of a square is that it has to have the 90 degrees in each corner. What do these 3 quadrilaterals have in common? So a rectangle, a rhombus, and a square. They are all parallelograms, meaning that they all have 2 sets of parallel sides. So here's a good visual, and it says, how can you find the number of parallel sides in a quadrilateral? So a trapezoid is different just because it's a quadrilateral, but it only has 1 pair of parallel sides, where a parallelogram is both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So how can you find the number of parallel sides in a quadrilateral? So the first step, quadrilaterals with pairs of consecutive equal angles will have 1 pair of parallel sides. The figure at the right has 2 pairs of consecutive equal angles. So it must be a trapezoid. So what it means is 25, 25, 150, 150. So consecutive means they come right after each other. So if I was to number this, it would be 25, 150, 150, 25. So if these two numbers are next to each other, or even if 25 and 25 are next to each other, then you know that it's a trapezoid because they have consecutive equal angles. Step 2, quadrilaterals with pairs of opposite equal angles will have two pairs of parallel sides. The figure at the right has two pairs of opposite equal angles, so it must be a parallelogram. So what that means is if I was to list the angle measurements, it would be 25, 150, 25, 150. So I don't have two consecutive numbers because it's 25, 155, 25, 155. So you know that would be two sets of parallel sides. If it only has one set of parallel sides, you have consecutive angle measurements. So 25, 150, 150, 25. So these two numbers repeat or these two numbers repeat. So if you're listing your angle measurements and two are next to each other that are the same, then you know that it's a trapezoid. If it's opposite, like 25, 150, 25, 150, then you know that it is a parallelogram. It has two sets of opposite sides. All right, so now if we look at your worksheet, properties of quadrilaterals, we kind of already went through the definitions of each of these, so it is kind of good review. So a quadrilateral just means a polygon with four shapes, quad meaning four. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel and equal in length. So again, these two sides are parallel, and then these two sides are parallel, and they're also equal in length. So notice the only one here that is not considered a parallelogram is a trapezoid because we already talked about it. It only has one pair of parallel sides. A rectangle is a parallelogram with four right angles. So here was the little boxes I'm talking about, which symbolize the 90 degrees. A rhombus is a parallelogram with all sides the same length. So 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches. A square, don't get confused when they say this, but a rectangle with all sides the same length. So they're considering it a rectangle because all angles measure 90 degrees, just like they do up in a rectangle, but all sides are equal. So that's how they define it, a square. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral with only one pair of parallel sides. And the reason why is because this side and this side are parallel, but if I was to extend this line right here with a ruler, they would intersect. So the definition of a parallel means two lines that never cross and are the same distance apart. So a trapezoid is a special kind of quadrilateral. And then just keep in mind that the sum, so when I add all the measures of the angles of a quadrilateral, it's always equal to 360. You can think about this as you can take any of these shapes and you can cut them in half, and each triangle, because there's two triangles within these, each triangle would have to equal 180 degrees. The angle measurements of a triangle equal 180 degrees, which we did on Friday. These have two triangles in them, so 180 plus 180 is 360. All right, so classify each quadrilateral, be as specific as possible. So you've been working on shapes for a very long time. I'm sure this is going to be very easy for you. So number one, what I'm noticing right away is that it has four right angles. I'm also noticing that these two sides are parallel and the same. These two sides are parallel and the same. So I'll give you a second. What do you think that shape is? If you said rectangle, you are correct. All right, so now I'm looking at number two. What I'm noticing is that there's not right angles. They're shifted a little bit, but all sides are equal. So what is that called? What quadrilateral is that? I'll give you a second to think. You can pause the video and finish, and then play it again, and we can just check our answers. So number two, if you said rhombus, you are correct. It is not a square, and the only way I know that is because it doesn't have those four right angles. Number three is my special quadrilateral, and I can tell right away this side is not equal to this side is not equal to this side. If I was to extend these lines, they would intersect, so I know this is called a trapezoid. Very good. Number four, how is a square similar to a rhombus, and how is it different? So right away, I notice that a square and a rhombus are similar and that all sides are the same length, right? But with a square, the square has 4 right angles and a rhombus does not. So here's an example right here. It does not have 4 right angles. So again, they both have the same, all sides are the same length. So both a rhombus and a square have the same length sides, but a square has 4 right angles and the rhombus does not. Just looking at your homework, it says classify each quadrilateral, be as specific as possible. You can use the front side of that to look and do exactly what I did. What do you notice first? Look at the side measurements and then also look at the angles if they're giving it to you, and then you can decide what shape that is. Name the vertices of the squares to the right. So remember, vertices is where it comes to a point, so you're going to label that using capital letters. And then number 6, the angles of a quadrilateral measure 80, 100, 100, 80 in this order. What kind of quadrilateral has this shape and how do you know? So we talked about that at the beginning. You can go move your video to the beginning if you don't remember what we said about the angle measurements and how to classify whether it is a parallelogram or a trapezoid. So if you don't remember, just review back. And then, can a trapezoid have 4 obtuse angles explained? So bringing in some of that knowledge about triangles and angles. Can it have 4 obtuse angles? Yes or no? And then explain to me why or why not. All right, have a great day. See you tomorrow.